Ayn Rand invites the reader into a world, an ugly and cruel dystopia in which everyone is stripped of their individuality and the collective is raised to the level of God. The first words are, "It is a sin to write this. It is a sin to think words no others think and to put them down upon a paper no others are to see." This book is perhaps the only example of a collectivist dystopia, and one of many books that champions individualism. You can guess that I'm not a huge fan of Ayn Rand, but there is no virtue in reading only books that agree with your preconceived notion of the world. So today we are talking about what Ayn Rand's Anthem means, my problems with it, and what good I found in it. And spoiler alert for the 2-star 1938 classic, Anthem. It is a common refrain in this book that which comes from one is evil. There's a pledge the children must all recite in school. We are nothing, mankind is all. By the grace of our brothers we are allowed our lives. We exist through, by, and for our brothers, who are the state. Amen. Even using the word I, the secret word that nobody even knows, is the only crime punishable by death in this book. Every character, every person must always use we. I am not hungry. We are hungry. I am not thirsty. We are thirsty. I am not tired. We are tired. I am not ready to go to work. We are ready to go to work. Our narrator, known only as Equality 72521, as two names are illegal, is punished for his individuality. Not just his flaws, of course, but for his virtues as well. Probably more so. It is, quote, not good to be different from our brothers, but it is evil to be superior to them. He's punished for his intelligence and curiosity, which he tries to hide and suppress. The Council of Vocation decides what his work will be for the rest of his life, just like the Council of Eugenics decides who he will have sex with and who he will reproduce with. The main character, Equality 72521, is guilty of another transgression, the transgression of preference. He wishes to be a scholar, but he must become a street sweeper. And as a street sweeper, he makes a friend with another street sweeper, that is, who is not liked because he smiles without a reason and had made drawings even though he was not an artist. Side note, smiling without a reason is bad, but it's also forbidden to not be happy. Interesting. The friendship is another transgression of preference, of course. You can't have a preference for another one of your brothers among all of your brothers. The narrator finds a tunnel and keeps it secret with his new friend so that they won't be punished. He starts sneaking out at night during the nightly play to hide in the tunnel, write, and conduct experiments. He falls in love with a woman who works near him, but men and women are forbidden to talk to each other except when it is allowed by the Council of Eugenics. And now you might be wondering how he can fall in love with a woman he never talks to, and that's a great question. Apparently she is really pretty, and the narrator starts thinking of her as the golden one. When they eventually do talk, she says she thinks of him as the unconquered. Now, our narrator goes on to single-handedly reinvent the light bulb in his tunnel. He decides that he must share his new knowledge for the power of the sky with the people. In his excitement, he forgets to come back in time before the play is finished, and he's found on the street. Now, he knows he needs to save his newfound knowledge, the knowledge of the sky, for the scholars at the World Council, so he refuses to explain where he's been. The World Council is like a meeting that's going to happen in like a month. So he's taken to be whipped, and he just waits in prison. So they whip him, he refuses to talk, he waits some more, an important judge comes, he refuses to talk, more important judge, and even more important judge, and even more important judge after that comes, and they all demand that he explain himself. But when the day of the World Council comes, he just walks out of the prison because everyone in this society is so docile and so subjugated that they don't even bother to guard the prison. Nobody ever tries to escape. He grabs his light bulb, still safely hidden in his tunnel, and brings it to the World Council of Scholars. But the scholars do not rejoice at his gift. They are terrified. They explain that it took a group of 20 men to invent the candle and 50 years to make the plans to replace all the torches with candles. That the candle-making industry is important, and one man can't destroy it. What comes from one man must be evil. So our narrator runs off into the Forbidden Forest. Did I mention there's a Forbidden Forest in this story, by the way? There is. Nobody ever returns from the Forbidden Forest. So while he figures he's at least going to die on his own terms in the Forbidden Forest, but he realized he can hunt his own food and tastes much better and comes with a sense of pride. So the Golden One follows his tracks into the forest, finds him, and declares her love for him. Or at least, she tries to, but is clearly frustrated by the lack of a word for I. She says, quote, "We love you." But then they frowned and shook their head and looked at us helplessly. "No," they whispered, "that is not what we wished to say." They were silent. Then they spoke slowly, and their words were halting like the words of a child learning to speak for the first time. "We are one, alone, and only, and we love you, who are one, alone, and only." After this declaration of love, our narrator finds a house with a bunch of books in the forest and starts reading them. He discovers the word for I, and he discovers names. He takes Prometheus as his new name because just as Prometheus gave fire to humanity and was punished, he gave the light bulb to humanity and was punished. And he names the Golden One Gaia because she will be the mother of a new kind of god. So whereas the dystopian society takes we and the collective to be God, our narrator, now called Prometheus, takes the ego, takes I to be a god, literally saying, "I am done with the monster of we, and now I see the face of God, this new God, this one word, I." And so after his divine revelation, he plans to come back to the cities of the oppressed and free them, and make his home in the forest the capital of a new world where the sacred word ego can flourish. Now, this book is clearly trying to say something, not just about its fictional world, but about the real world as well. The problem is that while books like Animal Farm or The Handmaid's Tale try to base their critique of the world in actual things that have happened, or at least reasonably could happen, the dystopia of Anthem is unbelievable in the worst way. There are societies which are more collectivist, like Japan, but Japan is nothing like this. They have the word I in Japan. They have love in Japan. There's North Korea, which is even more extreme, but also North Korea is nothing like this. North Korea still has the word for I. Nobody in North Korea is trying to get rid of the word for I or outlaw love. Soviet Russia, as awful as Ayn Rand's experience with it might have been, was nothing like this world she depicts. There is no society where everyone agrees to attempt to eliminate individuality and where the population is so submissive that they would have no need to guard the prison. Nobody advocates for getting rid of the word I or illegalizing love. This is simply not an opinion that has ever been held by more than a small fragment of a percent of society. It is a complete straw man, and so it fails to criticize, well, I'm not exactly sure who is supposed to be criticized. If this weren't trying to be a serious book, I think a similar premise could have been taken to be a satire of something. To take the ideas around a philosophy to such a ridiculous extreme could be a form of mockery. But in a serious context, like this book, it comes off as a straw man. The conclusion also seems outlandish. That ego should be a god above all other things is a claim that seems so ridiculously absurd that it could only be taken seriously in contrast to the claim that we should be a god above all other things. A claim that nobody outside of this book makes. Even within the book, the society seems self-contradictory. It's both illegal to be unhappy and smile for no reason. And this clearly makes no sense. The book does not address this or acknowledge it in any way, so it's hard to see it as some kind of hypocrisy of the dystopia and not just a flaw within the book's world building. Similarly, the transgression of preference is absurd. Clearly, the people in this world are still expected to have preferences. Obviously, helping your brothers is better than not helping your brothers within this world. And so maybe this was meant to mean that you couldn't have personal preferences that differed from society's preferences. And this would be supported by the fact that the narrator understood that it was wrong to like his friend because his friend was not liked generally. However, it also says that to prefer one of your brothers among all of your brothers is a sin. So the world building of this dystopia really just seems to fall apart. It's inconsistent and it's not addressed in its inconsistency. For instance, the dystopian collectivist society teaches that the world is flat. But in the real world, it is the most individualistic people who argue for a flat earth and maintain that the rest of us are simply sheep following mainstream science. This is often the case, that with time, science and our institutions around science adapt to new information and change how they view the world. But individualists will claim that these institutions are lying to us, and that, for instance, vaccines are harmful and the world is flat. Another example, the main character's scientific experiments are never really explored in depth, but he somehow, single-handedly, invented the light bulb. Historically, this is, of course, absurd. The light bulb was not invented by a single man. It was slowly developed over the course of centuries. Edison didn't wake up one day and create the light bulb from nothing. He went into competition with Joseph Swan over who would improve upon the already existing electric light bulb, which had been made decades earlier by people like Warren de la Rue, who themselves were already standing on the shoulders of giants, the people who made batteries. Science is cooperative. It's not a smart man alone in a tunnel working without any other knowledge. I found the idea of only being able to use we interesting, but ultimately unconvincing. The Golden One struggles to express her love to an individual and says, "We are one, alone, and only, and we love you, who are one, alone, and only." And now, I don't know of any language that doesn't have a distinction between I and we. That is, the first person singular and plural. But I know one that doesn't have a distinction between second person singular and plural. Modern English. So if I, and he, and she, and other singular pronouns are so important in this book, why isn't thou treated as equally important? I think it's obvious that we don't need to have a specific word for something to experience it. It feels empty for the Golden One to say, "We love you." She wants to say, "I love you." She senses that something in her individuality is lost with just, "I love you." But do you feel that I am robbing you of your individuality when I say, "I love you"? When your partner, or your parents, or your friend, or even yourself in the mirror when you have nobody else says, "I love you," do you feel like it's missing something? Would "I love thee," "I love thee," fill that hole? Of course not. There is no hole, because we can understand the language we grew up speaking and understand that when someone is speaking to you and says, "I love you," they mean you in particular. Just as they would be able to understand that when someone who grew up speaking in their dialect, in their language, says "we," in that context, they're communicating on their own half and not for a group. And this was such a central part of the book, but it really did feel empty to me. Now, the writing style itself was passable, but the characters felt flat. Now, I am willing to forgive flat characters a lot of the time, but it's particularly bad when the central theme of your book is the importance of individuality. I found this particularly annoying with the romance. There wasn't really a reason for the main character to fall in love with the Golden One. We were just given a physical description. Like, bro literally saw one pretty blonde and fell madly in love. It's not believable. The character of the Golden One is shown to have exactly two traits. She's blonde, and she is submissive to the main character, the natural leader. And in the second chapter she's mentioned in, she's described as looking at us as if they would obey any word we might speak. It also literally says, the head of the Golden One bowed slowly, and they stood still before us, their arms at their sides, and their palms turned towards us, as if their body were delivered in submission to our eyes. Now, if you want to be submissive, that's great. Being submissive is fun, and I'm not here to judge your relationships. But for it to be the only trait of the romantic interest's personality in a book about the importance of individuality, it feels lacking. I think it connects to a deeper problem with the book. It needs a leader. The Golden One, thinks of the narrator as the unconquered. She sees something in him worthy of following, and that's what she sets out to do. The narrator is superior to his fellow man. He is smarter, he is greater. He broke away and he will lead them away, and she could see that. But if the power and strength of individuality is so strong, why must they follow him like a king? Why are the others not strong enough to break away? If individuality is so strong, it seems impossible for it to ever reach anywhere near the level of this book, of its own degradation. It just seems impossible. Now, I don't like being purely negative, and I don't want to pretend that this is a completely irredeemable work. It's 2 stars, but it's short, so if you're interested in Ayn Rand, give it a read. But there are some good things which I'd like to mention. For one, Ayn Rand recognizes that eugenics was bad. Now, you don't always get that with writers from the 1930s, or, today. Another, she talks about being punished for being superior. Now, I don't think this really happens anywhere at the level that it does in this book, but sometimes people do feel a little jealous, or envious, or insecure when someone else seems too perfect, and it can be good to remind ourselves that it's not the best mindset. And there's also a line, and if this should lighten the toil of men, referring to the light bulb by the way, then it is a great evil, for men have no cause to exist save in toiling for other men. Honestly, I think this is something people can get caught up in thinking, that our value is in our ability to work for others or only serve others. I think this can manifest in a few ways, like placing too much emphasis on how much money you can make for the capitalist you work for, or simply not taking enough time in your life to take care of yourself. Your life shouldn't just be for the toil of others. And the final thing, the narrator says, "My happiness is not a means to any end. It is the end. It is its own goal. It is its own purpose." And I think this is true. You should value your own happiness. We can't escape the fact that we do things for ourselves. Even if you give your money away, you're doing so because of how it makes you feel. It makes you feel good to be generous, to be a good human. And you should understand this and value your happiness. Just understand that it doesn't mean you have to be a hyper-individualist. Now, if you'd like to hear me talk about the trauma of death and book banning, you can do that over here. But drop me a like before you go. And there is one word I had to look up while reading this book. It's larder, L-A-R-D-E-R. It's a large, cool pantry. I didn't know that. It's a cool word. Thank you, Ayn Rand. Good night, good day, and good potato.